So do you have a layoff story that you're willing to share?
I have a story of losing a job that I equate to a layoff story because I think the emotional impact was significant for me and relates to what I heard from so many of my clients and friends and people in my orbit around what being laid off feels like. This was before I started my coaching full time, and I was working at an organization and I was on a contract, which I loved. I loved my contract role. And I had a verbal agreement that once that contract completed, I would be offered a full-time job in an area that was really interesting for me. And it was a promotion as well. So it was added responsibility and a national scope. And my project ended and it was super successful. And then the funding for the program was cut. So I went out for lunch thinking, oh, I was going to be told about my new responsibilities in my future with the organization. And instead I heard, no, the funding's been cut for this. We no longer have something for you. And it had a big emotional impact for me. I felt blindsided. I felt like at that point in my life, I hadn't seen myself as an entrepreneur or that I would really be building out my coaching business. I saw myself very much as part of a team and a team player and part of an organization. And so, yeah, it was a huge shock. I was super upset about it. And there was like a significant recovery process for me. And then there was also a happy ending, which is it ended up being a positive detour for me once I licked my wounds and sort of assessed what I wanted to do next, and then slowly built out my business, and here I am. So it did turn out to be a happy mistake or whatever. I had a happy ending. So that's my example of a recent layoff story.
I have sort of a similar, event, which it means like it turned out well in the end. Mm-hmm. But, I've been working for myself for 15 years. So this is a pretty old story. But when I was in my early 20s, it was the first .com boom out here in California. So they were kind of handing out jobs to everyone. And my first job was at a company that made no money. Like they literally didn't charge anything for the products that they were creating. So they just like blew through all of their investment money and went under. And so I very quickly got another job and I hated that job so much. I was miserable there. And so I quit and then got another job a couple weeks later and then got laid off from that job after 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a job that I cared about. It was just like paying the bills. But I got laid off. And then because I had been laid off from that job, I was able to collect unemployment, which turned out to be a great thing because we had gone into the .com crash. So I went from a period of like, you could get a job in 2 weeks and make more money than you should be making for your level of experience to like, I couldn't get a job at Target. Like I couldn't get a retail job. Yeah. I couldn't get anything. So because I had been laid off, I went through 8 months of not being able to work. And, that takes a huge toll on how you feel about yourself and, your, just self-esteem. For sure. And, just everything really. But had I not had that job for 2 weeks that I got laid off from, I wouldn't have been able to get unemployment because I had quit the previous job. So if you quit a job, you can't get unemployment. If you get laid off, you can.
It's the same here in Canada.
Okay. So it was actually like a blessing that I got that job for 2 weeks and then got laid off so I could get the unemployment that carried me through 8 months of not being able to find work.
Mm-hmm. I love what you shared because I think it's the obvious fact that our market really does have a lot of ebbs and flows to it. And there's moments where there's a plethora of jobs out there and the market's really working in our favor. And then there's moments where the market is a lot more challenging. and it's a lot more difficult. And also you're pointing out sometimes we're resourced outside, whether that's we're getting, some money from employment insurance. Sometimes we get a package from our company. Sometimes we have a partner or some other types of systems to support us. And then other times we don't, we have different expenses, et cetera. So there's so many factors at play that color the conversation.
And we're talking about this right now because we are in one of these situations where it seems like a lot of people are either going through layoffs or have left a job for one reason or another and are having a lot of trouble finding a new position. And a lot of this came out of the pandemic. I think that there was a lot of change in our economy. A lot of businesses either hired or let go of a lot of people on both sides. That happened over the last couple of years, and now we're kind of in this correction where a lot of people are being laid off, and a lot of other people, because so many jobs went remote, the pool for hiring is so much larger now that it can be even more difficult to get hired for a position. So dealing with a layoff is something that I think a lot of people are going through right now. So that's why we're talking about it.
That's why we're talking about it. And I like what you said about just the pool being more competitive. And the fact is, when there's mass layoffs like this, we can find many individuals who have a similar background or profile to ours, which means it can become more challenging. And I heard some anecdotal crazy stats right now. If you're applying for a tech job, apparently out of 100 jobs, so this is just cold applications, but ones for which you're qualified. If you're applying for jobs out of 100, you'll get about a 1 to 3% response rate, which is low. I mean, putting together 100 applications is a lot to get 1 to 3 responses. And then once you get those responses, the interview process is now, I'm told, quite arduous. There's like a lot of rounds of interviews. Sometimes people are being asked to put together presentations of strategies. And this is time consuming and can be anxiety inducing and bring up a lot of stuff for folks. And finally, I'm hearing that the market is, it's really favoring the employers now. So some of the stuff that I'm hearing from my clients is that there's return to office mandates. Right when we got used to working from home and we thought that was a no-brainer, now some employers are saying, well, no, you've got to come back to the office. And some of the perks and benefits that used to be afforded to employees are no longer being offered. So it's a moment. It's a moment that a lot of people are working through.
Yeah. Okay, so let's offer some tips on how to process a layoff emotionally, things that you can do to deal with it.
Yeah. And we wanted to start here because I think there's the practical piece, and then the emotional piece can be so profound. One reason is because for many of us, we associate a lot of our identity with our professional role.
Yeah.
So that can be if we love our job, if we feel really proud about our job, if we feel really proud for working for a certain kind of company, and employers help feed this. So, they are often getting their employees to really get excited about the company, drink the Kool-Aid and really feel like they're part of this quote unquote family. And so it's easy.
But it's the first thing that you ask someone when you meet them. What do you do?
Yeah. I mean, it's cultural.
Yeah, right? It's a huge part of our identity.
It's a huge part of our identity. And so then when that's taken away, we can feel, shock, shame, sadness, grief, self-doubt, panic, all of these kinds of things. So it's a lot to process. And all of that is legitimate. Yeah. After all, you're spending how many hours a week at work? Like lots.
Yeah. That's interesting that you said shame. I hadn't really thought about that, but there definitely is, like, even if you are, you lose your job through no fault of your own, you are a great employee who's doing great, and it's a company decision, there is this shame of I'm unemployed. And that can have so many like snowball effects of, making you not want to tell people that you've been laid off, which then if you don't tell people, then how do they know to help you find a new job?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think acknowledging all of those feelings, naming the feelings, and working on processing them. And so many of our episodes are about this type of topic, like how do we become mindful of what we're experiencing and how do we process that in a healthy way. So I don't think it's a one and done thing. I think what I wanted to bring to light is just, it's normal. Whatever you're feeling is normal. And figure out what's going to help you move through it so that you can accept where you're at and start caring for yourself in a way that's going to make you feel better.
Yeah. You have to be like, this sucks. And, you can't just like, obviously you can take a few days to feel like crap and, do whatever you need to do to feel all the feels. But then you do have to take some steps towards, like you said, self-care, whatever you need to do to start moving on. And like, yeah, I'm still upset about this. It still, doesn't feel great, but I have to now take some steps forward.
Yes. And I really believe that a great way to do that is to do things outside of your sphere of work. So to remember, what are the activities that you enjoy doing? What are your hobbies? What are your relationships that feed you? What are your friendships that feel really good where you can talk about stuff outside of work, and to invest time in that again, and to remember who you are as a whole person outside of work. Because there's nothing like losing your job to kind of make you face the fact that like you are a whole person outside of your workplace.
Yeah. And this is a great opportunity if you happen to have a lot of time on your hands because you're not working, to volunteer somewhere. Because there's a ton of networking that comes along with volunteering, and a lot of people that volunteer are employed and are, people that you can connect to and build relationships with, and they could maybe bring you into their position or refer you to another position. So that's like kind of taking the time that you have available now to, give to something else, which will make you feel better about yourself, which will rebuild some of that self-esteem, but is also networking and giving you new opportunities.
Yes. So I love the volunteering idea, and yeah, just a reminder to take the moment, if you're able to do so, to really take the moment to check in with yourself and think about, well, now at this age and stage of my life, what is important to me? What do I want to spend my time doing? And to actually use your time to do that.
Right. Because you can only spend so much time applying for jobs. Like that's not an 8-hour job on its own.
No.
Like looking for jobs, applying for jobs, obviously spend time doing that, but you have to do something else. You can't just get into this like dread cycle of, refreshing LinkedIn all day.
Yeah. And that reminds me of an article that I read, which I mentioned to you. It's a Harvard Business Review guide to getting a job. And in that article, they recommend spending 1 to 2 hours actively applying for jobs online. That's 1 to 2 hours. And the rationale for that is you're to spend the rest of your time doing things with people that bring you joy. And there's a reason for that. Well, there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, it's building on what you said before. It's how you can meet people. It's how you get close to people, is actually doing activities with them. And so many jobs come from our relationships. They don't come from a cold resume application. Yeah. So this is a way to actually strengthen relationships and build new relationships, which is going to help you find a new job. Even if I think about you and me, now we've been doing this podcast, together. It's something we both like doing. We both enjoy doing. Well, how much easier would it be for the two of us to refer each other for jobs now, should that come up, right? Because we've built this relationship separate from networking for a job's sake. So start a podcast with someone as an example.
Yep. Going back to our stories and, the mindset piece, you can also decide if this change is something that you can use to make a career shift, if that is something that is open to you or something that you want to do. I know a lot of people who have gone through a layoff and then gone back to school or completely changed their careers, and it ended up being the best thing that has ever happened to them. So you can think of it as a positive. You may not feel that it's a positive yet because you're still in the negative, but if you can see it as an opportunity and take that kind of forced chance to make a change, that could be a great shift.
Yeah, 100%, because it can be very hard to leave a full-time job, even if in our hearts we know that we're going to flourish somewhere else, or we have this calling to do something else. There's plenty of reasons to stay in a full-time job, right? There's the relationships you have there, there's the salary that you have there, the accolades or sort of the projects that you've already run, the social capital that you have. So it can really kind of keep you stuck. And then if you're pushed out of the nest because of a layoff, there can definitely, not to minimize the pain, but for a lot of people, there's a hidden blessing there.
I'm thinking about Friends when Rachel was working at the coffee shop, but she wanted to go into fashion. And I don't remember which one of the friends told her this, but someone said, you need the fear. They're like, you have to quit the coffee shop job so that you will go and get the fashion job because you feel too safe and secure when you have your job. So,
oh my gosh.
This is forced fear.
Forced fear. You can be just like Rachel and Friends. And then move on to a flourishing fashion career.
So back to kind of the like emotional impacts and also the like connections. I mentioned that like one of the things that happens is when people feel shame, they like don't want to talk about it. They don't want to tell anyone. And I think the biggest, like most important thing that you can do is tell people, reach out to your network, reach out to your friends, whether that's just having a support system of people that, you're close to and that you talk to and you stay connected with, or whether that is actually asking people, can you help me get this job? I was talking to someone the other day who is in this position of being laid off, and there's a job that he wants and he knows someone at the company and he doesn't want to bother the person and reach out to them and ask for help getting the job. And I'm like, what? Like, that is how you get jobs. So, it can be hard, but you got to do it. If that's the job that you want,
well, that's it.
Ask for help.
That's such a great example of how vulnerable it can feel and how, how people can internalize this situation to think it means something bad about them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you give him a pep talk and tell him to go? Okay, good.
I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not surprised that you did. Yeah.
Well, he was worried about, not so much about asking, but he was like worried that he would get the job and then not do well. And that would look poorly on the person who referred him. And so I said, the answer here is not to not ask for the connection. The answer is to not do poorly at the job. Get the job and do well. You'll be fine.
Get the job and kill it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So you were chatting about, not self-isolating.
Yeah.
Right. So really putting yourself out there and talking to people about your situation and about what you're looking for.
Yes. Oh, that's a great point. So be specific. So I talk about this all the time with people who are consultants or, who have clients. And especially in the marketing world, like there's thousands of us and there's also like a lot of specialties. And I know 100 people that do something similar to what I do, but I don't know what they specialize in. So if a lead comes across my desk and I don't want it, I don't know who to refer it to because they want something specific. Because all these people just say they're in marketing. And it's like, well, what marketing? So when you are talking about what you're looking for, be specific. Here are my skills. Here's what I'm great at. Here's the type of company that I will fit in at. Here's the titles of the jobs that I'm looking for. Like, the more information that you can give people so they can help you easily, like, make it as easy as possible for them to just see that and go, oh my God, I know the job just for you. Like, don't make them work to help you.
And I think everything you're saying makes so much sense. And I think for a lot of people, they don't know. They don't have that clarity.
Sure.
And so, I mean, that's often what I'm helping people with, is just finding the words for what it is that they want next. So I think, take the time to figure that out, to figure out who you are as a professional in this moment. You're different than you were, unless you were like Pam and you got laid off after 2 weeks. Most likely you've been in your role for a significant amount of time, so that who you were before is, and what you were looking for then, is different than now. You have more skills, more wisdom, more experience, more age than when you were in this previous job. So who are you now? What skills do you have now that you want to bring forward? What's your ideal? If you want to go into consulting or some kind of fractional role, define what that is, get crystal clear, spend time researching, find someone to help guide you through that process so that you can be confident in yourself, knowing what you want, and then as you said, be really clear with your friends in your network about what it is that you're seeking.
And it can be an exercise that, like you said, really does build you up.
Yes.
And, you can kind of like list out your accomplishments and things that you enjoyed working on, things that you were really good at, and then be like, I'm great. Right? Like, I have so much to offer. And that can kind of be an antidote to that, like, shame and feeling terrible about being laid off. Yeah,
I love that. And actually, a friend of mine who I was recently speaking with, who also went through a layoff process, was talking to me about recruiters. And now they're really, maybe recruiters have always been like this, but it's very much checking boxes. So if they're filling a role, it's like, do you have this? Well, do you have this particular skill? Tell me clearly, and tell me an example of when you did it in a way that matches clearly with this particular role that we're looking for. So I think this exercise of getting your profile done, like owning your profile, owning your story, right? Like taking authorship over that, and then coming up with your examples, your success stories that light you up when you tell, that are authentic and true, and that also light you up when you can tell them, and they paint a clear picture of what you bring to the table. As you said, that can be a really affirming activity as well for yourself.
Yeah.
And will help you when you're chatting with the recruiters.
For sure. And interviews too. That's another thing. If you haven't interviewed in 5 or 10 years, you might need a little practice.
Yes, true.
So find someone that you can practice with, know that you're going to be asked things like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Those kind of things, and be ready to answer those. Have answers prepared.
Always have your answers prepared. Yeah.
So not everyone that's listening has been laid off. A lot of you have stable jobs and are not in the position of having to do a job search. So we want to talk about some things that you can do to plan ahead, because even though your job may feel very stable, like we talked about earlier, there's a lot of market forces that are at play, things that have nothing to do with you, a lot of economic upheaval going on. So it's just a good idea to always take care of yourself and plan ahead and make sure that if you are in a layoff situation, that you're as prepared as possible.
I love it.
So mine, which people will not be surprised to hear, involves money. So my biggest tip is to take care of yourself first, pay yourself first by working towards having 3 months of expenses saved in an emergency account. I think job searches at this point may even be taking like 6 months and more. So 3 months is a bare minimum. You don't have to obviously get that overnight, but make that a goal that you get to the point where you do have that emergency savings set aside, so that if you do lose your job, it's not a situation where next month you can't pay your rent. Like you can take off some of that stress and know that you have a little bit of a runway before it becomes an emergency situation, because you're going to be a lot more, like your energy is going to be a lot better when you're interviewing and when you're applying, when you're not like, oh my God, I need this job because I can't pay my bills. Like that, that energy is not great when you're trying to find a job.
It's so true. And so much of our impact on other people comes from our nonverbal cues. And part of that is our energy. And so if we have an energy of franticness, fear, desperation, panic, it's very hard to mask that, and the people around us will notice. And so anything we can do to kind of mitigate that. And we're talking about, take care of yourself and nurture your hobbies and take care of your body and all this stuff whilst looking for a job. But if you are, feeling very stressed financially, then it's hard to do those things. So what you're saying makes so much sense. Working towards having that solid emergency fund for potential job loss is really important, because a job loss can really happen very easily. I think people can get into like a false feeling of security, like, oh, my company values me, they value their talent. But at the end of the day, within the corporate structure, we're all replaceable. Sorry to say that, but it's true. We're all replaceable. We're all just cogs in like a corporate wheel. So realizing that, I think it's scary, but it's also liberating. Like none of us are that special in the corporate space.
Well, and if you take that control of, making sure that you have a financial cushion, then you can, that control feels good, right? And you are taking the control of the direction of your life. And also it puts you in a situation where even if you're not laid off, if you want to change jobs, you have that freedom.
Yeah, more power for you.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. My next point, no one's going to be surprised by this point of mine, is that to remember, so before you get laid off, if you ever do get laid off, is to spend time remembering who you are as a whole person outside of work. And this is the same thing that I would tell people who are, approaching, even within 10 years, retirement, so that it's not a huge shock when that structure isn't there anymore. What do you love doing? What do you love about yourself? What's going to make your life fulfilling? And how can you integrate those relationships and those activities into your life right now, so that work is a great thing that you do. It's a part of your life, but it's not all of your life. Start kind of knowing yourself and loving your whole person now outside of the workplace.
I hadn't even thought about this in the context of retirement. That makes a lot of sense. You get some hobbies.
Get some hobbies. So true.
Yeah.
Read some books.
Read some books. And kind of similar, but another thing is to not get complacent about your skills. Ooh. So right now, in the position that you're in, continue learning, continue leveling up your skills, continue being interested in things outside of the scope of just your role, so that if you do want to change jobs or end up in a layoff situation, you have a robust skill set that can help you move into other positions if your exact same position is not available somewhere else.
Great. I love that. And building on that, networking now. So developing relationships, building real relationships with people in your field, in adjacent fields, staying on top of what's happening in the field that you're in or fields that you're interested in now, so that you have some seeds planted.
Yeah. Go to conferences. If your industry is something that, there's newsletters or Substacks or something like that where people are talking about it, comment, engage with people, post on LinkedIn, whatever that is that you can do that keeps you connected in your industry and starts to build your brand.
Yes.
Like that, you really are, when you're looking for a job, you are selling yourself. So if you have this brand and people like recruiters or employers can go and look at your LinkedIn profile and see that you share really interesting viewpoints and intelligent comments and all of that, then that can just only help to build your profile and make you more likely to be one of those 1% to 3% that gets contacted.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit more about the idea of branding and, let's say, for example, LinkedIn and how somebody presents themselves on LinkedIn. Because what I see with some of the clients that I work with is there's a tendency to really profile their workplace when they're on LinkedIn. So their brand on LinkedIn a lot of it will be about like what their employer is doing.
Oh, I see.
Right. And so I'm going to suggest to people to take a more balanced approach where by all means you can talk about your work projects, talk about all the great things your employer is doing. And at the same time, own who you are as an individual, like a contributor to that organization. Well, what other thoughts do you have outside of that your employer is great? What other contributions do you want to make about this? As you said, Pam, like what are some other articles you can post about your field or like slightly adjacent to your field? So that you're developing your own voice. You're not just parroting your organization's voice.
Yeah.
Because that's
be a whole person on there.
Be a whole person and your work can be part of that. But that's to me that's a more empowering way of looking at branding.
Yeah. Make sure, I think this was about what you were going to say when I interrupted you, but like make sure that you're building your brand, not building your company's. You can even talk about, what you do, where you volunteer or other interests you have, as long as it's not like, don't turn LinkedIn into your Instagram, but do bring some personality there and show how you stand out and how you can contribute to an organization positively.
100%. And I think that's a strategic exercise for the future, as we're talking about, because stuff takes time. When I think about some of the business that's come to me, some of the partnerships or clients, those seeds were planted years ago. Right? An introduction was made or an impression was made, a conversation was had, and then it took several years for something to blossom. So don't wait until a potential layoff happens to start branding on LinkedIn or whatever your platform is. If possible, start before. And again, then you can start with an energy of confidence, with an energy of feeling more relaxed because you already have a job. So there's not sort of that other energy. So I think that, my point was I think it's a strategic thing to do. And then as well, I think it's a self-empowering thing to do because you're remembering, what do I stand for outside of, like, in addition to my job? You can still be proud about your job. You can still talk about all the stuff they're doing. But what else do I want to say in my voice here? Which I think is a very valuable exercise from the perspective of your own personal leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if people have friends that have been laid off, how can they support them?
The number one thing is to be there for your friend. Sounds sort of obvious, but I think sometimes we can feel awkward if we think somebody is feeling sad. We don't know what to do with those feelings. We can feel worried we're going to say the wrong thing. So I think just continuing to say, I'm here. I think you're awesome. Everything you're feeling is normal. And I'm rooting for you. And what can we do that's fun? What can we do? What can I do to cheer you up? Can I do A, B, or C? Can I come over with food? Can we go for a walk? Can I take you for lunch? Just to make it really easy for them and just to keep showing up and checking in on them.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about how, if you have a friend in your friend group who has been laid off and you're making plans with the friend group, maybe you guys are going to all go to brunch or go on a vacation or something like that. The instinct is going to be to not invite that person because you don't want them to feel bad about not being able to afford to go. And I think that's the worst thing that you can do, because then you're like cutting them off from their friend group. So hopefully you can have great communication with your friend and be like, hey, we're all going to brunch. We know that you're in a spot right now, so we want to cover you. Or like, like support them. And obviously, if you're not in a position to pick up the tab, don't do that to yourself, but like make sure to include them and, schedule activities that don't have any cost involved.
Yes.
Go over to their house, go for a walk. Like your social interactions might have to change a little bit, but that's better than cutting them off because they can't afford to go.
Yes, 100%. And I think a lot of social interactions are changing, and for a lot of people, the way we spend money is changing. I think post-pandemic, I've noticed there's been more consciousness around spending and conscious spending. And so, for example, decisions to have, a no-cost spa day where a bunch of friends will get together at somebody's home, and how can you have a great day? You don't need to go spend, hundreds of or thousands of dollars, whatever, at a spa. You can do a bunch of stuff at home. So I'm seeing a lot more conversations and articles about this. So I think our kind of conversation is changing around spending because a lot of people are dealing with inflation and rising cost of living and job insecurity or loss of a job or whatnot. So great, get on that bandwagon with your friend and find some interesting ways to have fun that don't cost money.
All right. Anything else?
My last words would be, if you've lost a job or been laid off, I think the great opportunity there is to practice not taking it personally. Because on the other side of that is freedom. And good luck. And may you find something bigger and better that makes you way happier.